Our scripture today tells the story of those two prophets, Elijah and Elisha, not to be confusing or anything, right? The mentor and the apprentice, and the moment of transition from the older to the younger. The names share that word El, meaning God. The name Elijah means Yahweh is my God. And Elisha means God is my salvation. Like little Elliot's name, Elliot, the Lord is my God. And we have an Elijah too. Before we encounter today's strange vision, there's another vision that comes before and sets the stage for our story today. And actually, it isn't so much a vision as a meeting with God through sound. Many of us have heard the phrase, the still small voice, referring to the voice of God. Do you remember the story where this comes from? Queen Jezebel had determined to kill the prophet Elijah. And when he heard that she was after him, he ran for his life. And when he finally made it to the wilderness, Elijah felt ashamed that he had run. And he was ready to give up on himself. And he asked God to take his life from him. As is also the case with God to us, God was far more gracious to Elijah than he was to himself. God cared for him and told him to go and stand on the mountain and wait, for God was about to pass by. Elijah went and he stood on that mountain, and first there was a terrifying blasting of wind, but it was not God. And then an earthquake, and then a fire, but God was not in them either. And finally, there came the still small voice, or sheer silence. And in this quiet was God's voice, God's presence, and their conversation began. Elijah told God what had been happening in his life, that he was alone left as a prophet, and that his enemies wanted to kill him next. And God told Elijah to go and find an apprentice, to appoint Elisha to be the next in line so that he would no longer be alone. And Elijah appointed Elisha, and they served together for a time, a close bond. Elisha sticking to his master and learning every drop of wisdom that he could until the time would come for Elijah to leave him. And this is the story we heard today about the whirlwind and the chariot of fire, the time when Elijah would leave. First, Elijah tried to go off on his own, but Elisha would not leave his side, knowing what was coming. And seeing that loyalty, Elijah asked his apprentice what he could do for him before he was taken. Is there anything I can give you? In movies, whenever someone gets to make one wish, what do we want them to wish for? Infinite wishes, right? So I'm always rooting for them. Infinite wishes, come on. Why ask for something so small? Elisha was wise like this. He asked to inherit the spirit of Elijah. And not just one serving of Elijah's spirit, but a double portion. Give me twice what you have. He had big shoes to fill. In this story, you may have noticed how Elijah used his cloak. Charlie mentioned it, the mantle, to touch the Jordan River and make it open. It's a symbol of Elijah's spirit. After Elijah was carried up in that whirlwind, Elisha found that mantle laying on the ground and picked it up as his own. And then he too used it to touch the river to head back home. Just need a couple props today. Have you ever inherited an enormous task or stepped into big shoes, taking over from someone who was a giant in the work or deeply loved? At my first church as a senior pastor in Ohio, in the baptistry, there hung a set of waders that the pastor should wear when they baptized. If I stepped into those waders, they would have come up to here. They were literally big shoes. That pastor was huge. Needless to say, I just went waderless as I do here. But there are sometimes people we come after, and it is daunting. Sometimes we take on a task or an office that feels larger than ourselves, that feels greater than the sum of our parts. Like Elisha's new mantle, we have symbols of authority that help us as we step into those roles. You may know that I think at 3 or 4 different hospitals, I was a hospital chaplain on and off over the last couple decades. And when I served as a hospital chaplain, I put on one of these each day, a lab coat. It gave me, I think, a sense to the patient that I belonged in that space, that I was someone who was comfortable there. And for me, it weighed me down with the gravitas I needed to face what were sometimes tragic situations. 20 years ago, when I started as a pastor, I used to wear this every Sunday. I could not be wearing this morning. I would faint, right? Every Sunday I put this on, and every Sunday I wore a suit. But when you're older, you can get away with less formality. So now I save it for funerals or weddings. But it was a symbol of authority. And as you know now, today, this is what I wear every Sunday. Before worship, I go into my office and I spend time in prayer and preparation. And before I leave that room, I put on this stole. It's a symbol of the yoke of Jesus, who said, "Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Many other fields have their own mantles. Professors are hooded in a special ceremony. Last year at Vacation Bible School, we all tried on firefighter Walt's outfit, from the helmet all the way down to the boots. And gym coaches and lifeguards, they have those whistles, right? Put that whistle on and you are in charge. A symbol of authority. As you reflect upon your life, is there any task before you that feels daunting? Is there anything coming ahead that fills you with trepidation? It might not be a vocation. Maybe it's the challenges of being a parent or a caregiver, or being a child of an aging parent, or of making a necessary but difficult choice about your life, preparing for surgery, or figuring out what is the road ahead of me. If you were there that day at the Jordan River with Elijah, what would you ask for? What do you need for the task you have ahead? Wisdom, courage, patience, confidence, time, friendship, hope. I encourage you, like Elisha, to be bold and ask for what you need. If you need a double portion or a triple or a quadruple portion, ask and keep asking. Ask God and also ask others who may be able to help. Jesus often encouraged his followers this way: ask and you shall receive, search and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened to you. Jesus told a parable of a man knocking at his neighbor's door in the middle of the night, and the neighbor was not going to get out of bed and open that door by any means. But this man kept on knocking and knocking and knocking. And so finally the neighbor got up and opened the door. That sounds like an example of advocating for anything in healthcare or social services. Knocking and knocking, but finally they will open the door. Some translations of that ask and search and knock verse in Matthew 7 make that ongoing sense of the words more plain by translating the text: keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking, and you will find. Today, my prayer for you is that whatever you are facing, if there is anything daunting before you, whatever it is that you need to fulfill the call that God has given you and the responsibilities that God has placed into your hands, that you will truly receive a double portion.